Alright, good morning, Common Core Algebra 2. Today we are going to look at 1.7, Chapter 1, Section 7, Part 1. And Part 1 is going to be all about absolute value equations. So Part 2 we'll look at inequalities. But back to Part 1, we're going to solve our absolute value equations today. So first part, to remind ourselves what an absolute value is, it refers to the distance a value is from 0. So important piece there is our distance, and our distance is never going to be negative. So if we look at -6, or the absolute value, which is what the red symbols are in all these values, the distance -6 is from 0 is still a positive 6. Likewise, the distance 6 is from 0 is a positive 6. And because we're going to deal with distance as a positive number, all of these are just going to be their positive version. -7 is 7 units from 0, 8 is 8 units from 0. Solving an absolute value equation, or what we're going to want to describe an absolute value equation, the variable, so an equation with an absolute value in the variable, but really we want to think about this variable is actually inside the absolute value, such as this. So we can have multiple pieces inside, or multiple values inside the absolute value as well, like 2x plus 6 is fine. We have the -8 outside our absolute value, that's okay. We can multiply by a number outside and front, that's fine too. One thing, or next, to solve an absolute value equation, we're going to start by isolating the absolute value. So we want to get this piece, this whole thing by itself, like we would a variable first, and then we're going to create two equations where we have one positive value and one negative value, and at the same time you're going to drop the absolute value symbols. And after we've done those two equations, we're going to solve each equation individually, and we should get two solutions. Looking at our example again, then, we're going to start by isolating the absolute value. So like we said, we want to get this piece by itself, which means we need to add 8 to both sides. And if we add the 8 to both sides, we end up with 2x plus 6 equals 23. Absolute value is by itself, so we're done with step 1. The next thing is we need to create two equations, one positive, one negative. Also remember, we're going to drop our absolute value symbols. So our positive, I'm going to write 2x plus 6 equals 23. There's our positive version. And then the other one, 2x plus 6 equals, we want to change this value to -23. Now before we do step 2, if this value right here is negative, after we've isolated, so in between step 1 and step 2, if this value is negative, then we'd actually be done. There is no solution. But since that's not the case, we're going to finish solving here. We're going to solve each equation, and to get rid of that plus 6, I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, which will give us 2x equals 17, and then divide both sides by 2. And so our first answer, x equals 8.5. Remember, we're going to have two solutions. So the first one is 8.5. We do the same steps over here. We subtract 6, but we're going to get different values this time, because now we have 2x equals -29. Same last step, we divide by 2, and so x equals a -14.5, and there is our second solution. Now very rarely we could get these two to be the same value, but really that's only when this equals 0. Any other time you're always going to get two solutions. And so that is it for solving absolute value equations. Biggest new thing is that we need to make sure we're making two equations, one positive, one negative. That's the thing we tend to forget the most. So we'd make two equations, one positive, one negative, and then solve both those equations. We should get two solutions. See you next time.